Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. Today is part 3 of our Microsoft Flight Simulator default A320 test flight. If you remember, we finished part 2 on the descent into Edinburgh, and in today's video we'll continue from there, carrying out the arrival and landing into Edinburgh Airport. I do hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel, and if you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them down in the comment section below. I'll come back to you again at the end of the video with my overall analysis of the default A320, but for now, thanks very much and I hope you enjoy the flight. So just as a reminder, we just descended through 20,000 feet into Edinburgh. We're just about to pass through this rather beautiful cloud layer in front of us. We're slightly high on the approach, so we've got half speed brake at the moment. Probably pretty much back on profile now, so we'll stay the speed brake. Sounds like the sim does model icing, so if we need the engine anti-ice we'll turn that on when we go into the cloud. Pretty much back on profile now. Should be doing about 1800 feet to maintain the profile. So we'll try VS. Go 1500 feet just for now. There's a restriction at Tala. I'm not sure that's actually correct looking at my chart, but try and fly it broadly anyway. So that's VS minus 1500. Had very mixed results trying VS so far in this aircraft. Seems to be working okay at the moment. Just make out some of the Scottish Highlands below us. It's really a stunning part of the world, Scotland. If you've never been there in real life, I highly recommend it, and likewise I highly recommend it in the sim. I'm sure it's stunning. Unfortunately with the cloud cover today we can't see too much of the scenery. So far the aircraft is behaving a lot more normally than on the previous attempt at this flight. Last time around, as I said, VS seemed, vertical speed mode seemed very buggy, and the descent was just all over the place. Air traffic control was also working pretty poorly, so that wasn't helping. Yeah, again, the only real issue I have with the sim so far is, well, one, that it's crashed a few times, but you kind of expect that from a flight simulator. And it's only crashed under the same scenario every time, so maybe it's just an issue loading flights. But the air traffic control is really the big issue that I have. It's actually significantly worse than either FSX or P3D air traffic control, so I'm not really sure what Microsoft was thinking there. Maybe it's just a very early stages air traffic system and they're planning to pad it all out later on, but at the moment the voices sound worse, more artificial than the previous voices used in FSX, and the sound quality is very tinny. The really big issue I have is a lot of the readbacks, you don't get any voice for them, so you don't hear them, and meanwhile air traffic control is giving you clearances that you can't hear, and then eventually they get fed up with that and they terminate your air traffic service. That's 10,000 feet, switch the landing lights on. Just more or less level off to allow the aircraft to decelerate to 250 knots. Yeah, so the default air traffic system is almost unusable at the moment. Possibly they are really just putting all their hopes into VATSIM. Not everyone wants to use VATSIM, myself included. I'm not sure I'll be using it. So you can't really rely on it. You should have a decent default ATC system as well, in my opinion. Anyway, how are we doing for the descent? So 10,000 feet, need about 40 miles. That's looking pretty good. Overall though, I'm really happy with the sim. Microsoft and Asobo, they've both done an amazing job. Black Shark AI as well, I guess. The whole thing comes together really nicely. I think it's fair to say that there are certain aspects even to this sim that are just as good in older sims, but you would need payware or some sort of Ortho 4XP scenery to get the ground scenery looking anywhere near as good as it does in this sim. The weather we've already touched on, but that's just second to none by a long, long way. The weather system is so good in this simulator. And then the flight model seems pretty decent. All the GA aircraft, I've been pretty happy with the flight model. This is the only airliner I've flown so far, and as I say, it's certainly got its issues. The aircraft handling isn't accurate, and the fly-by-wire doesn't work very much like the real aircraft. Anyway, we'll maintain 6,000 till we pass Taller at 11 miles past Taller. Be nice if we could tune Taller. We'll try. The real aircraft would auto-tune for us. No. It's the 113.8. Try that. Nope. Just put in just the frequency. Yeah, that works. Okay, we've got the ILS now, India Victor Golf, that's correct, that's quite nice. We've got Taller, but we don't seem to have any DME measurement from it. In fact, it doesn't even seem to be showing the VOR. It may be that my chart, again, it's out of date, so it might be that the frequency for Taller's changed, but I doubt it. Anyway. Okay, the aircraft's decelerating. Looks like it's gone into the approach phase there. It's actually trying to decelerate below green dot, which is not accurate. So we'll go selected speed 230 knots. Shouldn't do that. And we'll maintain 6,000 until we're past Delta 322 kilo, and then we can descend down to 5,000. Need about 24 miles for the descent. We're at 21 miles. Things are looking okay at the moment. Just come off the descent rate a little bit there. We'll try and avoid levelling off. Not trying too hard to manage the descent accurately here. This is really more about the aircraft and teaching you how to fly the Airbus. That's Outstar. Once again, this really isn't an Airbus tutorial per se. If you want to see how the aircraft's flown in real life, I do have an Airbus SOPs tutorial series on the channel, so go check that out. Today we're just investigating the default A320. Okay, we've passed over our waypoint now, we can descend down to 5,000 feet. Again, it's not letting me go into VS, which is not accurate. So we've got 5,000 selected. I'm pulling for VS. Okay, now it seems to be working. It's difficult to tell whether some of this is... no, because now we're at minus 1000. Yeah, it's definitely buggy there. Look, I've got VS selected on the FMA, minus 1000 selected on the FCU, and it's not doing anything. I'm getting pretty high now, so we'll just do... open descent. So that's descent out blue 4000. As I say, we're now pretty high, or at least a touch high. So there's definitely something wrong with the autopilot logic there. It's not quite working as it should. Also, I've noticed the flaps. So green dot is showing 225. We can't decelerate below green dot, so we need to take some flap before we can reduce the speed below 225 knots. But the flap limit speed is 218. So actually we can't decelerate below green dot without overspeeding the flaps, so that's inaccurate. But what we'll do for now, just to avoid overspeeding them, is we'll select 200 knots. But again, the aircraft should not behave like this. Let's descent. Coming up on the glide slope now. We'll arm the approach. Should be able to select both autopilots with the approach selected, but that's not a big deal. Got open descent, glide slope light blue, autopilot 1, take flaps 1. Yeah, I'm quite interested to see how the aircraft handles the ILS. I've seen some really bizarre behaviour on certain people's YouTube videos. I'm quite interested to see how much of that is user error and how much of that is the aircraft having the issue. I suspect from what I've seen it's actually the aircraft that has the problem. Looking at that restriction there, I'm not sure that's accurate. 4,000 feet at the final fix. Hopefully we'll capture the glide slope before that anyway. Bring the speed back to 180 knots now. And we'll take flaps 2. Should go into glide slope style momentarily. There's glide slope. This approach altitude is 3,000 feet. So again, we should see 3,000 feet now on the PFD, but that's not working correctly. The approach checklist briefing is confirmed, ECAM status is checked, seatbelts are on, barra ref QNH2971 set, minimum MDA 310 is set, and the engine start selector is normal. That's the approach checklist complete. Into the clouds now, shouldn't be any icing.
2,500.
Okay, well so far the aircraft does seem to be flying the ILS quite nicely actually. I'm not sure if they improved that with the release version or whether it was just user error that I was seeing on the YouTube videos. It's 8 miles, gear down. Come back to 160 knots now. Yeah, these F speeds and flap limit speeds, they're all wrong because you shouldn't be descending below F speed without taking more flap, but you can't take more flap because you'll overspeed the flap selection. So that's a bit strange. Flaps 3. And we'll go flaps full now. Landing checklist, cabin crew advised, auto thrust, speed, auto brake, low, and the ECAM memo. Again, that's in op. The signs are on, the cabin's ready, the landing gear is down, flaps are full, and the spoilers are armed. That's the landing checklist complete. Go manage speed now.
1000.
We are stable. Really lovely visual effects there with the sort of slightly hazy morning and the sun reflecting off the haze. Managed speed actually seems a little bit high there. I'd expect an approach speed of more like 140. Anyway. Okay, there's the runway now. Just shift up a little bit in my seat. So I'll disconnect the autopilot. Shouldn't go into open descent, should stay in glide slope, so that's an inaccuracy there.
500.
Just trending a little bit high. 500's checked.
400. 300.
Okay, there's 2 reds now.
200.
Getting slightly low. Again, the aircraft not really responding as I would expect for the control inputs. We're sinking quite a lot. I've got a lot of nose up here now.
60. 50. 40. 30. 20.
Okay, that's idle thrust.
Retard 5.
Bit of a float there. Can't actually tell if we're down or not. I think we are. Go full reverse now. And manual braking. 370 knots. Cancel the reverse. And we'll come off at the next right. Yeah, so that landing ended up getting a little bit squirrely there, but I wasn't sure if we touched down or not. Definitely need a bit more feedback from the visuals and the sound there. Could do with some camera shake or something when you touch down. Also, the rudder is very sensitive. I noticed that on all the GA aircraft as well. All that snaking down the runway there after we touched down, that was just well, ultimately it was my fault, but that was me responding with a bit of muscle memory there and it not really working out as I'd expected. Anyway, we'll vacate here and we'll just taxi onto any bay that we find. So after landing, strobes can come off, landing lights off, nose lights taxi. We'll disarm the spoilers. Looks like they've disarmed themselves, which is again not accurate. And the flaps can come up. We'll get the APU started. And the after landing checklist: flaps retracted, spoilers disarmed, APU starting, radar is off, and predictive wind shear is off. So the after landing checklist complete. We'll just taxi onto this parking bay here. Not even sure if this is actually the taxi-in line for the bay. The gate is a long way off to the left there, but usually the taxi-in line should be a yellow line. We'll just park roughly anyway. So park brake is on. APU is available. Turn on the bleed. Engine's off. Should have turned off the runway turn-off light and the taxi light before we came onto the bay. Beacon can come off now. Fuel pump's off. And the transponder can go off. It should be about us. The parking checklist: APU bleed is on, engines Seatbelts, again, we should have turned those off, but they're in op. External lights set. The wing lights should be off. I didn't turn them on, but that must just have been from resetting the flight. Fuel pumps off and the park brake is on. That is the parking checklist complete. So there we go guys, we've completed our flight from Manchester up to Edinburgh in the default A320. As I said, I'll just give you a quick rundown on my thoughts and feelings about the aircraft. We'll start with the good. Overall, visually, obviously they've done an amazing job, both externally and internally. The virtual cockpit in particular, it's a really nice model, the texturing's amazing, it's a very immersive place to be. The same can be said for the sound, both outside and inside. The aircraft sounds really nice, and I think it really adds to the immersion having a decent sound model on an aircraft. Handling wise, I would say it was 50-50. It certainly doesn't handle like the real aircraft, but for a default aircraft I don't consider that to be a major issue. As long as it's flyable in a reasonable way, which it certainly is, I think that's good enough. Obviously we're catering to people that are new to flight simulation and just want to have some fun generally with the default aircraft, so the flight model was certainly decent enough that you can hand and fly the thing. Systems wise, again a bit of a mixed bag, but overall I was pretty impressed with the systems modelling. Obviously there are a lot of inaccuracies and inoperative systems, but overall there was enough there to be able to simulate reasonably accurately an Airbus flight from A to B, and it was certainly more than I was expecting from a default aircraft. Similarly with the MCDU, there was enough functionality there to accurately simulate setting up the MCDU and using it throughout the flight. It would be nice to see a little bit more functionality and maybe a few more improvements, particularly as I mentioned with the flight plan distance accuracy on the MCDU, but again for a default aircraft a lot better than I was expecting. Most of the inaccuracies with the aircraft I find to be not too much of a big deal. As I said, it does give you enough functionality to broadly simulate Airbus operations. However, that brings me to my major gripe with the aircraft. Obviously you can probably tell already, but the autopilot for me was a big letdown with the aircraft. It's I think unfortunately it was a casualty of Microsoft or Asobo trying to be a bit too clever. They've obviously tried to simulate the real world A320 autopilot, which whilst commendable, they've unfortunately fallen far short of doing that. Not only was the autopilot logic inaccurate, which I don't really mind, but it was getting to the point at times where it was actually becoming quite an obstruction to flying the aircraft. When you can't do simple things like even selecting VS, it really does make things quite difficult, either for someone that already knows how to fly an Airbus and has expectations of what's going to happen, or as a newcomer to the sim. If you're trying to select VS and it's not working, obviously you're going to be wondering what it is that you're doing wrong, and in actual fact it's the fault of the aircraft. So I actually would have preferred if the developers had gone with a more simplified autopilot, somewhat like the default A321 in FSX. I think that's actually a better approach for the default aircraft, given that they're mostly going to be used by people that are new to simulation, and I'd rather have a autopilot that works in the way I would expect and is more simplified than something that's trying to be fully functioning but falling short of doing that. Overall though, to summarise, actually pretty impressed with the default A320. It's certainly not going to please many people who are looking for a full fidelity pay-wear experience, but for a casual simmer or someone that's new to flight simulation, or even someone that just wants to take a more relaxed and scenic flight in an A320 within Microsoft Flight Sim, the aircraft does a good job, and it is a nice place to be. As I said, particularly the virtual cockpit is very immersive. Anyway guys, I do hope you found the video useful. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel, and if you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them down in the comment section below. Thanks very much, and I'll see you all again soon.